You know that feeling you get when you plan something out, you work the plan, and it just works? Isn't that a great feeling? Well, it was about a month ago. It was a Tuesday, January 17th, actually. We had just finished a Toastmasters meeting here at work, and I was kind of enjoying the afterglow of the meeting. Just kind of worked. When I get a call from my friend Jill. Now, Jill is with my other Toastmasters club, and she had been planning for like 3 months. She'd been planning this open house where we were going to bring in lots of former members of the club, people from the community. Really a big deal. And I know that Jill had been working hard on it. So she called me up. Says, "Hey, Gary." I say, "Hey, Jill, how you doing?" She says, "Good. What's your speech title?" I said, "My speech title?" She said, "Yeah, you know, the speech you're going to be giving in the open house in 2 days." Let me change my opening question. Have you ever been scared stiff and not had a speech, but had to give one? Well, I fairly recently went through this on January 17th. And so I wanted to share a few things that I learned. And I'm hoping that they can help the rest of us when we have to give a speech and put one together quickly as well. And I have basically 3 tips. The first tip is we should speak on something that we know very well. When you're preparing a speech quickly, you don't have time to do research. You can't look up all the languages in the world. You can't figure out how to say genuflect in various languages. It has to be something that pretty much just comes out of your head, something that you know and you can put down on paper. In the case of that open house speech, it was pretty easy for me because what I was speaking on was the public speaking course that we were about to start giving to the general public, and which is actually going on right now. I had been planning this thing for months, so it was right at the front of my head. So it was really pretty easy to put together a speech pretty quickly. Now let me give you an example that didn't work out so well. When I was in college, I studied electrical engineering, but I always had a sort of a fascination for physics. I didn't really know physics, but I thought it was cool. In 2013, I discovered the wonder of online courses. And so I thought, this is great. I could take online courses on quantum physics. And I did. I took 2 online courses on quantum physics, and I read a couple of books. In other words, I knew enough about the subject to speak about it at parties to people who didn't know. In 2014, I joined Toastmasters. And now I had to think about, well, what are my speech topics that I'm going to use? And I thought, I know. I'll do a speech on quantum physics. Needless to say, there's a big difference of knowing enough to talk about a subject at parties to people who know nothing about the subject, and giving a speech on it to people in the audience who may just be physicists. That one didn't work out so well. So what should you talk about? Well, I think each one of us has our own areas. For me, it would include music, APIs, baseball, adoption, storytelling, Star Trek. Those are my areas. Your areas may be different. So that's my first tip, though. If you need to prepare a speech quickly, think about, what do I know in my head? What can I just basically pull out and put on paper? The second tip is to use a structure. If you look in the CC manual, especially in project number 2, you'll find a whole bunch of different structures listed, topics, chronological, and so forth. It really doesn't matter that much which structure you pick. You can pick different ones for different speeches, but pick one of those structures and then stick to it. The structure is, I look at it as kind of like the bones of the speech. It's the skeleton. It's what lays out how the speech works. Once you have that skeleton, then you can start putting on the meat. And I would actually start with that skeleton. I don't know how everybody else writes speeches, but what I find works the best is I actually start with the structure. So I say, if I'm going to use a body that has 3 points, let me write down those 3 points first, then let me start going and filling them in. Once I have the body in pretty good structure, then I go ahead and add an introduction. I don't know if anybody writes the introductions first. Yeah? If it works for you, that's great. For me, what I always find out is by the time I get finished doing the body, I want to scrap the introduction. Start over again. So that's the way that I do it. Start with the body. So my first tip then is to pick a subject that you know. And my second tip is to use a structure for the speech. In this particular speech today, you can see what my structure is. In the body, I had the first point being speak about something you know. The second point being use a structure. And the third point is where I'm about to get to. So that's my second tip. My third tip for preparing a speech quickly is once you finish your speech, you have it all written out, now you're ready to go perform it, right? Right? Wrong. We need to rehearse it. Now I know somebody right now is thinking, oh man, I hate rehearsing speeches. And I know somebody's thinking that because that somebody is me. That's what I'm thinking. I hate rehearsing speeches. I was in my hotel room last night rehearsing my speech, talking to the cozy couch in the corner of the hotel room. So I think we all hate rehearsing. Actors hate rehearsing, but they do it. I was once listening to a public speaking podcast, and yes, there are public speaking podcasts, and yes, I really do listen to them. I'm such a geek. But on this public speaking podcast was a former actor turned public speaking coach named Michael Port. And Michael Port said something on this podcast that really turned my head around. He said, think about what actors do. An actor will rehearse his lines for weeks and weeks and weeks so that when he gets up there on stage or on TV, he really knows what he's talking about. He said, for an actor, rehearsal is your job. And I thought about that and I thought, yeah, you know what? As public speakers, that's our job too. After all, we're going to take up the time of people who are listening, so we should put in the time to rehearse the speeches ourselves. Now, you might wonder, how much time should I put in a rehearsal? The answer is as much as you have. If you're going to be preparing a speech that you're going to give in 2 days, I would say that by the end of the first day, you should be rehearsing it. Because what I always find is as I'm rehearsing the speech, I'm changing it. It's improving. This speech that I'm giving right now, I guarantee you, if you go back and look at the original version that I wrote out, it covers the same basic points, but it's much different. And I think probably better. It gets more natural to the way you naturally talk. You don't say things like ridiculously stilted, which I said in another speech of mine. You say, it just sounds ridiculous. So it gets better, it improves, the more you rehearse it. So those are my three tips. First, pick a topic you know. Second, find a structure and stick to it. And third, rehearse as much as you can. Now, at the beginning of my speech today, I have a little bit of a confession to make. I kind of implied, well, I told you that story about the 2-day speech for the open house. Now, that's actually totally true. It was January 17th. I did have only 2 days to prepare, and I had completely forgotten that I had signed up to give a speech. So that part was actually totally true. But I kind of implied that that speech is what inspired this one. That's really not quite true. The speech that inspired this one, I didn't have 2 days to prepare. I had 2 hours. And I can tell you, I used the exact same process. Pick something I knew, use the structure, and then rehearse it. If you only got 2 hours, how do you rehearse it? I used the first hour to write it, second hour to rehearse it. It really does work. Now, I hope that you never have to give a speech in 2 hours. But if you do, we all have a process now to use. And to be totally honest, it's a little bit of a rush. It really is. You work it, you get done, and then you can look back at that 2-hour speech and say, I did that. I did it.